Writing end-to-end tests has traditionally been a bit of a pain in the bum. They depend on so many specific details about your app, such as UI elements being in exact locations on the page, or the page containing specific text, or the route being structured exactly as it is now. But that's the thing, your app is a constant evolving thing, and it's going to be changing as new requirements come in. This means your fragile end-to-end tests are going to need to change quite frequently, which is not only frustrating for you, the developer, trust me, I've been there, but it's also a big waste of time. There's a reason why the famous testing pyramid puts the end-to-end tests at the top and the much easier to maintain unit tests at the bottom. So what often ends up happening is you end up with some crazy deadline that you need to meet and your tests aren't passing, so you end up commenting out the test just so you can get your build to pass and you get your deadline and get your feature out on time. And you'll come back to uncomment those tests when things settle down, right? Right? And besides, that's what the QA department's for, right? Those guys should catch any issues that might crop up as a result of your changes. But what if your company is too small for a QA department, or your app is so large that there's no way that the QA guys are going to be able to test everything before each release? If only there was a way we could somehow access that self-directed intelligence of a human QA worker, but package it up into a box and have it run on the CI in every single commit. I think you can probably see where I'm going with this. Stagehand is a library from Browserbase that allows us to use natural language to control a browser. So you can see in this very nice little animation they have here that shows how you control the browser to open to a page, then ask it to extract the price of the first cookie, then ask it to add to the cart before completing the checkout process. This is super cool because nowhere in here am I specifying details such as the exact button ID or the DOM structure that's expected to exist. It's just a natural set of instructions that you would give any human to follow. So that's what we're going to look into in this video. We're going to go through how to get set up with Stagehand and Convex, how to use it in a real project, some tips and tricks that I learned along the way, and how much all this is going to cost. Spoiler, it's less than you might think. And I'm also going to finish on some future work here. I personally think this is a really exciting and valuable use case for AI that you can get going with today and get some real productivity gains. So once you've dropped me a like and sub, let's get into it. Okay, to get started, you're going to need a Convex project of some sort. Well, actually, technically, you can use Stagehand without Convex, of course, but for this video, we're going to use Convex. I won't go through all the steps of getting set up with a Convex project here. Just hop over to the docs and follow one of the quick start guides. Once you've done that, you can install your favorite testing library. Mine is currently Vitest, and this will be the one I'll be using in this video. Okay, so I'll just pause here for now and just show you the project that we're going to be building our end-to-end tests for. So this is a personal project that I have slowly been hacking away on over the course of a few evenings and weekends. It's a website built for my local community for their annual Christmas lights competition. So you can book tickets to go on a cruise boat that goes around the canals and checks out all their houses and their light displays. This website also manages a competition that's being run. So you can see there's a few mock entries on the page here. If I click one, you can see in a carousel of the pictures for the competition entry. If you click on this button down here or the map button at the top, you can view the entry on a map, which is quite nice. If I click another entry, then I can choose to view the entry, which opens up the entry page, and I can choose to vote on it. So I can choose to vote in one of the two categories if you are signed in. Speaking of being signed up, so you can click here on my entry to enter the competition by filling out the various details like so. Once done, your entry enters a submitted state, which then needs to be approved by the competition organizer from the admin page here. Obviously, only certain users are going to get this admin privilege. Not all users are going to get the chance to do this. But anyway, if I approve it, it should now show up on the map. Now, I'll save you the technical details of how all this works under the hood. Probably not relevant for this video, but if you are interested in me doing a video on the internals of this project specifically, then leave me a comment down below or a thumbs up on somebody else's, as it's the best signal that I have to know what to make next. Okay, so you now have a sense of what this project's all about. Let's have a look at writing some end-to-end tests for it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is split your end-to-end tests from your unit tests, because you're probably going to want to run these test categories independent of each other. You're not going to want to run end-to-end tests, which take a lot longer at the same time as running your unit tests probably. So there's a couple of ways of doing this, but I think this is the best way to do it, is to use Vitest's projects feature. So we can do this by pulling out our current unit testing config into a separate project section like so. Now we have an end-to-end project and a unit project, which only includes certain test files and have specific test settings. Then you can just run one project with bunx vitest run project unit or end-to-end or whatever. It's pretty cool. Okay, so as you may have noticed from the config, this project already has some existing unit tests that live inside the Convex folder, shared in source directories. And this is generally the way that I like to write my unit tests. I like to have them live alongside the source code that they are testing. End-to-end tests, though, are a bit different, as they're usually testing a much larger set of behaviors in the application. So I like to put them into their own separate folder that I've here called end-to-end, or E2E, sorry. Okay, so before we look at the actual tests, let's talk a little bit about the setup that you're going to need to do first. So let's take a quick look at the Stagehand docs here. So as we talked about in the intro, Stagehand is a framework that's going to allow us to use AI to automate the browser. To do that, it leverages the awesome Playwright library. In fact, Stagehand is built on top of Playwright. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Playwright or others like Puppeteer or Selenium, they basically provide an API around the browser like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or whatever, and allows you to easily call functions to navigate pages, get contents, take screenshots, etc. Anyways, the point is, for these to work, you need to obviously have a site URL to point at to be able to navigate around. And we could do this by pointing to our currently running local dev Vite server that I'm using here, that we start when we do bun run dev. But the problem is that this web server is pointing to our development Convex deployment. And the issue with that is that we want the test to be repeatable as possible. And so that means that each time we run this, and between each test, ideally, we want to have a nice, clean, repeatable environment to work from. And so if I am developing this app here and my end-to-end tests running at the same time, they're going to keep wiping my state that I'm developing with, and they're going to mess up my environment variables and whatnot. So it's not a great experience. You kind of want to separate these two development environments. So instead, what we need really is we need a way to be able to spin up a Convex backend dynamically that runs independent of our development environment. And then we also want to be able to spin up a new Vite instance and then point that to our new temporary backend. So that's what we're going to do here with this setup E2E function. Let's just pop it open, and we can see at the top here we have this Convex backend and a Vite frontend and a Stagehand instance. Then down here we have a Vitest before all function, which is going to run before any test runs in this suite. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to init our Convex backend. And if we just quickly open that, we can see that it's going to work by downloading a copy of the standalone Convex backend binary. Did you know that Convex is entirely open source, by the way? And you can run it either from Docker container or as an entirely standalone self-contained binary file, which is really nice. It's pretty cool, if you ask me, that you can get all this power of Convex backend wrapped up into a single binary file like this. Anyway, back to the code. We now have the binary downloaded, so we can just boot it up on a random port. And also just note this super important bit here, because we're starting up the backend ourselves, we can pass it an arbitrary instance name and secret, which we have, I have a couple hard-coded up here, but those mean that we can pass it an admin key, which allows us to do admin-y things on the back end, such as changing environment variables or deploy code to it. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. Once it's up and running, we're going to deploy our code from our Convex directory in our project to our testing instance here. Now, just back up to our setup function from before. So now that we have our Convex backend running, we can take the URL that it gives us and pass it to our Vite frontend instance to start up with our Convex backend. So now that we have our front end running as well, we can boot up our Stagehand instance, which is going to start Playwright, open the browser, and we're all good to go. You notice that I'm also doing a couple of things down here with private keys. This is to set up authentication system in the application, which is Convex Auth, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. Okay, so finally we can have a look at the actual tests. So firstly, you'll notice that I've split them up into three distinct distinct categories of tests. I want to test everything from the perspective of a public user. So that's one that's not logged in or authenticated. I also want to test from the perspective of a voter. So somebody who just wants to come and vote on something. And I also want to test from the perspective of somebody who wants to enter the competition. So a competition entrant. I structured it like this because don't forget the purpose of end-to-end testing is to test the high-level behaviors of the application and ultimately give you, the developer, the confidence that the system is working the way that you intend it to. So I want to ensure that for the various kinds of users that are going to be using my application, that the main ways of using the application is going to work as I intend it to. But let's dive into this test a little bit more now. So let's have a look at the simplest case first for a non-authenticated or a public user. So let's have a quick look at the application first, just to show you what it is that we're going to be testing for here in this first test. So if I open up the application, I'm going to sign out to make sure that I'm a public user. And then I want to make sure that my visitors are going to be able to buy a ticket to go on the cruise from the first page. Now, there's two ways you could do that. You could either click on this button from the top nav bar up here, or if I scroll down a little bit here, you can click on this big red button to go buy the tickets. Ticket buying, by the way, is handled by Eventbrite, which doesn't actually work on local hosts. It has to work on HTTPS. Hence why I get this error when I press the button, but here's what it looks like when it's running on an actual HTTPS domain. But for the purpose of these end-to-end tests, I'm happy if users can just navigate to this tickets page here, and there's a button that they can press to open up that Eventbrite modal. I'm happy if I can test that series of steps working. Now, if we hop back to the code, we're going to start by calling this goTo function. And this is a special function that I'm exporting from the setup A2E function from before. If we quickly have a look at that, we can see that it's just a simple wrapper around Stagehand's goTo call, which is in turn going to call Playwright to navigate a URL. I wrote this wrapper just as a way to abstract away the prefixing of our locally running Vite server and to pass in a type safe route that I'll show more in a little bit later in this video. Okay, so by this point we should be on our correct page, and now we can finally actually do the meat of our test. So we can tell the Stagehand AI to act by clicking the Book Tickets Now button. Then we ask the AI to observe the page to find the Buy Tickets button, and we finally do our expect here to make sure that if it is not the case, then this test should fail. Okay, so pretty simple. Let's take it for a spin. So I could either run this test by using the command line like I showed you before, but if you install the Vitest VS Code extension, you get this very nice UI in your IDE, so you can just click here to execute the test. So we can see doing so is going to start up a browser on the home page. It's going to navigate to the tickets page, and then the browser is going to close, and our test has succeeded. Huzzah! And you'll notice in the output panel here is a bunch of logging information and a little summary about the number of tokens and the estimated cost. I'll talk a little bit more about the cost in later in this video. But all these logs, settings, and everything is obviously configurable inside the setup function I have here. Note I've got this verbose logging turned on and a custom logger written here, as I felt like I wasn't getting quite enough information that I needed while I was testing this. And you also note that this really nice thing about Playwright here is that you can actually record a video of your run. I've got that turned on, so if I open up the folder here, I can see there's a bunch of videos from various runs I've done before, and I can click one to watch it. This is super useful if you ask me, and very, very useful if you run in a headless environment like on your CI server, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. Okay, so one test down, let's have a look at another test now. So again, this one's for a public user. It tests that the user should be able to navigate to the entries page and view the entries there. Now, obviously, if the database is empty, we're going to end up with a blank page like this. So to fix that, we have this handy client object that I've exported from the Convex backend, which allows us to call our create mock entries mutation here. If we just click into that, we can see that this is a testing mutation. So this is a custom mutation that I've defined up here. And if you want to learn more about how to do this, this is called custom functions. You can check out the Convex helpers library. Anyway, so this testing mutation is just a normal mutation, except it doesn't allow calling it unless we have this isTest environment variable set. But if it is set, then the handler is going to get called, which means that it's going to call this function here, which is basically just going to generate a bunch of random mock entries for us. But I'm not going to go over the details of that right now. It doesn't really matter. Let's head back into our test. So by this point in the test, we should have some entries created on the screen. So we should be able to ask Stagehand to extract some data from the page. And the nice thing about this API is you can specify a Zod schema that the result should take. So here I expect there to be an entries, which is an array with an entry name and the entry number. Then after that, I'm going to check the length of the array, and it should indeed be 9 because that's the number of mock entries we created up here. Okay, so that's about it. Let's take this for a spin. So again, we can watch it and the homepage loads, it navigates the entries page, which is empty to begin with, and then it's populated and then exits and our test passes. Super duper nice. Okay, so now we've seen the 3 main APIs of Stagehand. Act enables Stagehand to perform individual actions on a web page. Extract grabs structured data from a page. Observe allows you to turn any page into a checklist of reliable actions. And there is one final one here which we haven't looked at yet, which is, in my opinion, potentially the most interesting one, which is agent. This turns high-level tasks into a fully autonomous browser workflow. So let's just take a quick look at that one now. To begin with, let's just have a look at what it would look like if we'd been doing it the way we've been doing it up till now, as a series of individual steps. So we're going to start out going to the home page as usual. Then we're going to sign in because voting requires that you are authenticated. How this sign-in process works is not really important right now. We're going to have a look at that in a minute. For now, just assume that this logs you in and returns the user object me here. Okay, so now we need an entry to vote on, so let's create one here. Then let's shortcut things a bit by having the page jump to the dedicated entry page that we're specifically interested in testing in for this voting flow. By the way, this is kind of what I was talking about with type-safe routing. This is all thanks to the type route library. I really need to do a dedicated video on this library because I'm in love with it. But anyways, now that we're on the entries page, we can click on the vote button and then vote for the best display. Then we can grab all the votes, again, using our custom testing query here that will only be available when running testing in the testing context. Then we should expect there to be exactly one vote, and the voter should be me object, and it should have been for that specific category. And now we can just give this a crack. You can see it opens the page, goes to the home, quickly signs in, opens the entry page, opens the vote modal, and votes. Right, so there's quite a few manual steps involved in this process, and I guess you could argue that we're tying ourselves too close to implementation, going back to the way that we were doing things at end-to-end test before, where we were, again, expecting things to be in certain places. So let's imagine now of ourselves to be in the place of our users. When they land on the site, they aren't going to know where everything is or how to get there. Their only goal really is going to be, I want to vote on this entry with a specific entry number. So that's what we can simulate here with this agent function. We can give it the very high level goal to vote for an entry with the number that we provided from the mocks that we created up here. Then once again, we can expect the vote to be in the correct category for the right entry. Also, just note here that I haven't told it that it needs to be able to log in to vote. It's up to the agent to work out how to do that, or that it needs to do that, just like a human user would have to work this out. Okay, so let's take this for a spin. So it's going to take quite a bit longer to run. So I'm going to speed things up a little bit, and as we watch it go to the right page and then sign in and then go back to where it was before and then cast the vote. And huzzah, it works. So this is super nice, right? As we aren't anymore tying our behavior to our implementation at all. It's almost as if we've been able to have a new fresh user test out our site with no prior knowledge. And another really nice benefit of this is that we get to watch the AI struggle as it navigates our page, and we get to read its thinking. And this is super valuable because it gives you fresh insight into what difficulties actual human users may very well encounter as they use your site as well. I actually experienced this myself in another agentic test down here that I have for entering competition. I asked the AI to work out how to enter the competition. I watched it as it navigated around the site. I saw that it would start off from the homepage here, and then it would think about, how do I enter the competition? And it would click this entries button up here because that's the one that looked the most relevant. And then it saw this big view competition details button at the top here, and it clicked that. And then it would get confused on here because there was no indication on this page here exactly how to enter the competition. So when I noticed that, I was like, I need to add a section at the top of the page here that gives a nice clear button to enter the competition. So this kind of like user experience optimization is really cool because it wasn't really possible prior to the invention of LLMs outside of doing expensive and time-consuming user studies. Now, I have to admit that although it did run and succeed on this particular run, it's unfortunately not always the case that it always succeeds. And I think that maybe this is just the price you're going to have to pay for this non-deterministic AI having free reign over navigating around your app. Sometimes it's just going to go down another branch of possible ways of doing something, and it's going to get stuck sometimes and not work out how to be able to solve the test. Now, I suspect there are ways that we could go about minimizing this by prompting things a little bit more carefully, or simply increasing the intelligence of the model, the size of the model that you're using. Actually, so let's just talk about the model stuff now. So I experimented with quite a few here, as you can see from inside the setup E2E function. I really like the speed of the Gemini Flash Lite model, and it is super duper cheap. But as this evals graph that is on the Stagehand site shows you, it's just a bit dumb, and it would often it would not always reliably get to the result. So right now I'm actually using the GPT-5 mini model. I found that it's kind of the right sweet spot for me for like the really good intelligence and cheap price. As we can see from the run output from before, that it's actually cost us to do that one test considerably less than $0.01 to run, which in my opinion is pretty good for like an on-demand QA department like this. So other than globally setting the model that you want, you can actually change the model per agent or even per step if you want. I haven't experimented too much around with this yet, but I can imagine getting quite clever with this, where you could get it to run using the dumb model to begin with, and if it fails, maybe like progressively increase the intelligence until it passes. Okay, so this video is getting way too long, but I have two last topics that I want to cover before we wrap up, which is Auth and CI. So as you saw before, the AI is able to work out how to sign in itself, and we're also able to do this programmatically sign-in process. So now this application is using Convex Auth to authenticate its users, and I'm only using Google Auth, as you can see from the sign-in page here. Now this is a problem for end-to-end tests because I don't want the AI to have to use Google account every time it wants to sign in to be able to run the test. It would be slow and problematic, and probably Google will end up blocking me eventually. So instead, when we start the Vite front end in our setup function, we pass in this Vite is test mode flag. Then in our sign-in page, I do a check for that flag, and instead of rendering the normal page with the Google Auth on it, I'm instead going to render this test auth page. So this is that page that you may have briefly noticed earlier. This lets the AI pick a name, a username, and sign in. Then on the Convex side, we have this special testing credentials provider for the Convex Auth object, and we're going to make sure that it's only available when we're running in test mode. Then that provider is just basically just going to do the dance that we need for Convex Auth, creating the new user, etc. And this works really well. The AI is now able to optionally sign in if it wants to. Sure, it's not exactly the same flow that the real human would take, but again, testing is all about giving you, the developer, confidence that your app is going to work the way you expect it to. So in my opinion, it's a good compromise. Now, the question is, I guess, how would you do this for other auth solutions on Convex, such as Better Auth, Clerk, WebOS, etc.? Well, that is a good question. I actually haven't done those yet, so I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect you'll be able to do this kind of shortcutting flow no matter which solution you're using. But having said that, if you would like me to see more information on this, leave me a comment down below and I will do a follow-up on it. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about now is running these tests on the CI, because it's all well and good having these end-to-end tests written, but if you aren't going to run them, then what's the point? So I was a bit nervous going into this because I've had nightmares in the past trying to run end-to-end tests on a headless browser in CI environments. But I have got to admit, I was pleasantly surprised about how painless this was getting this all running. So here's the GitHub Actions file that I used to make this all work. So first it checks out the code, installs Bun, installs the dependencies. Then I set up some caching for the Playwright browser so that we don't have to re-download it every time we want to run these tests. Then we install the browser and run the tests. Now I'm going to have to pass in our keys here into the Stagehand tests. I'm passing both the OpenAI and the Google ones here as I was experimenting with both those kinds of models. And once these tests are done, it's going to upload the recorded videos to the artifacts so you can go and download them and rewatch them and see what happened. Very nice. I really like being able to download the videos and watch them if something didn't go quite as expected and try and debug it. By the way, if you don't want to mess around with all this CI stuff yourself, Browserbase, the makers of Stagehand, have a cloud offering which makes it super easy to run your tests on their cloud with real-time video feedback and all the other bells and whistles. So if you don't want to go through all this headache yourself, go and check them out. Okay, so we're getting very close to finishing here. I just want to talk about one extra thing, which is the future of this work. I'm personally really bullish on the potential for this, and I'm going to push internally to try and get my half-baked setup that I've got going here turned into a really fully featured end-to-end testing solution for Convex. If you agree with me and think that this is something that we should spend some more time on, then drop me a comment down below, as it will help justify the reason for spending more time on it. I think even if we can just make it a little bit easier to download and spin up a standalone Convex backend without having to write so much messy code like I did before, then I think this will be a big help. Oh, and by the way, if you want to get access to all the code and everything that I've shown in the video, then I've left links to all of it down below. And just before I wrap up here, I want to leave you with one solid piece of advice I was given to by a good friend of mine and mentor, Stray, many years ago when I first started to learn testing. She said, if it's worth manually testing something, then you might as well make it repeatable. And this has stuck with me ever since and has echoed in my head over the past year as vibe coding has taken off. Rather than continually manually testing the output from the AI over and over again because who knows what might have broken this time around, you might as well make your manual tests repeatable by writing some end-to-end automated tests. And hopefully now with Stagehand, those end-to-end tests that were so brittle before are hopefully much less of a pain and much easier to maintain over time. And on that note, thanks for watching everyone. Until next time, cheerio.